I woke up as a failed tailor, then changed fashion forever. Part 2 of 2. Chapter 6. A Promise Without Words. Ashefield Village exceeded every expectation I had. It wasn't as grand as the royal capital. It didn't have towering estates or bustling markets filled with nobles. Instead, it possessed something the capital lacked: warmth. The villagers greeted one another by name. Children ran freely through the streets while the aroma of freshly baked bread drifted through the air. The entire village felt alive. "I can see why Jared chose this place," I said as Maxwell and I walked toward the bakery. He nodded. It used to be an ordinary farming village. And now people travel from every corner of the kingdom just to eat here. I laughed. I understand why. The moment we stepped inside Jared's bakery, the smell alone nearly made me weak in the knees. Fresh bread, roasted meat, butter, herbs, something sweet that reminded me of caramel. The dining room was packed from wall to wall. Villagers sat beside nobles without anyone paying much attention to status. Everyone was too busy eating. Jared spotted us almost immediately. "You made it!" He hurried over, flour still dusting his apron. "I've prepared something special." "I wouldn't expect anything less," I replied. He led us to a private table near the window. "Don't order anything. I'll decide." Maxwell chuckled. That sounded less like a suggestion and more like a command. "When it comes to food," Jared said proudly, "you should trust the chef." Within minutes, dishes began arriving one after another. Freshly baked herb bread with whipped butter, creamy mushroom soup, perfectly roasted chicken seasoned with herbs I'd never seen in this world, vegetables sautéed with fragrant spices, grilled river fish with citrus. Finally, a delicate fruit tart for dessert. I stared at the feast. "Jared!" He folded his arms proudly. "Eat." I didn't need to be told twice. The first bite of bread nearly made me close my eyes. The crust crackled softly before giving way to an incredibly fluffy interior. The butter melted instantly. The herbs added a depth of flavor this world rarely achieved. Then came the soup. Rich, earthy, silky smooth. The roasted chicken was somehow even better. Juicy, perfectly seasoned. Every bite carried layers of flavor that reminded me of restaurants back on Earth. I slowly set down my fork. "This," I looked across the table at Jared, "is the best meal I've had since arriving in this world." His face lit up. "I'll take that as a compliment." "You should. It rivals restaurants from my previous life." Maxwell glanced between us. "I've never seen you this impressed. I've also never tasted food this good." For the rest of the meal, conversation flowed effortlessly. We talked about our businesses, about the strange differences between this world and the one Jared and I once knew. Of course, Maxwell remained blissfully unaware of what we were actually comparing. He simply smiled whenever Jared and I became unusually excited over things like tomatoes, cinnamon, or proper bread fermentation. When it was finally time to leave Ashefield the following morning, I found myself already looking forward to returning. A week later, the royal palace buzzed with celebration. Today was Duke Carmichael and Jared's wedding. The invitation alone had surprised me. The king himself would officiate the ceremony. Apparently, the duke's contributions to the kingdom and Jared's role in solving the food crisis had earned them not only respect, but genuine affection from the royal family. The palace gardens had been transformed into a breathtaking venue. White flowers lined the stone pathways. Golden banners fluttered gently in the breeze. Crystal lanterns hung from ancient trees, sparkling beneath the afternoon sun. Every noble house of importance seemed to be present. As one of the designers for the wedding attire, I found myself seated much closer to the front than I'd expected. Naturally, Maxwell sat beside me. He looked unfairly handsome. Again, the charcoal suit I designed for him fit perfectly beneath his formal ceremonial cloak. Across the aisle, Duke Carmichael wore the midnight blue wedding coat I'd made specifically for him. Beside him, Jared wore ivory accented with silver embroidery. The contrast between them was exactly as I'd envisioned. Different, yet perfectly matched. Seeing them standing together, I felt strangely proud. "I think they're nervous," I whispered. Maxwell glanced toward the couple. "I believe you're right." The ceremony began. The king spoke warmly about loyalty, about trust, about building a future together. Unlike the formal weddings I'd attended in my previous life, this one felt deeply personal. There were smiles, laughter, even a few tears among the guests. Then came the vows. Jared looked directly into Carmichael's eyes. I crossed worlds without knowing where I belonged. But somehow, I found home in you. A soft murmur spread through the audience. Even I had to blink away the sudden sting in my eyes. Carmichael smiled so gently that it made my chest ache. My title brought me many responsibilities. But meeting you was the greatest blessing of my life. I would choose you again. In every lifetime. Silence settled over the gardens. Beautiful, comfortable, complete. Without realizing it, I felt my own emotions swell. Maybe it was because Jared had once lived in the same world as I had. Maybe it was because I knew how impossible it felt to begin again. Or maybe it was simply because love looked so effortless between them. As the couple exchanged rings, I felt something warm brush against my hand. I looked down. Maxwell's hand had moved beside mine. His fingers hesitated for only a brief moment. Then, they slipped between my own. Our fingers intertwined naturally, as though they'd always belonged that way. My heart stopped. Slowly, I turned toward him. Maxwell was already looking at me. There was no uncertainty in his eyes, only warmth, and a smile so soft it seemed meant for no one else. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. I smiled back, without letting go. And somehow, watching two people promise each other forever, I couldn't help wondering if my own future had quietly reached for my hand without either of us realizing it. Chapter 7. Ashes and New Beginnings. The wedding reception was every bit as extravagant as the ceremony. Long tables stretched across the palace gardens, overflowing with dishes prepared by Jared and his team from Ashefield. Crystal chandeliers hung from temporary pavilions, while musicians filled the evening air with soft melodies. Guests laughed freely, raising glasses to celebrate the newlyweds. Jared caught my eye from across the room and gave me a grateful smile. Seeing him so genuinely happy made me smile in return. "You've been staring at the food for 5 minutes." Maxwell's amused voice pulled me from my thoughts. I was admiring Jared's work. "You've already praised it at least 10 times. It deserves 20. He chuckled. "I won't argue with that." Before either of us could continue, the lively conversations around us gradually quieted. People began stepping aside. I turned toward the entrance of the pavilion. The king and queen were walking in our direction. My eyes widened. "They're coming here." Maxwell remained perfectly calm. "Yes. Why are you so calm?" "They're coming to speak with you." "Excuse me." The royal couple stopped before us. Both were dressed magnificently, yet neither outfit felt excessive. They carried themselves with quiet confidence. The king smiled first. "Master Clayton Cornell." I bowed respectfully. "Your Majesty. Your Majesty. I've heard quite a bit about you." The queen's eyes sparkled with curiosity. "So have I. We've admired your work from afar." She glanced toward Maxwell. "And Lady Argon's gown was simply exquisite." I felt my ears grow warm. "Thank you." The king folded his hands behind his back. "The Kingdom of Valedorn will soon celebrate its founding anniversary. A grand banquet will be held here at the palace. We would like you to design our ceremonial attire." For a brief moment, my mind went completely blank. The king and queen wanted me? A designer who, only weeks ago, had been struggling to pay rent? I forced myself to remain composed. "It would be the greatest honor of my life." The queen smiled warmly. "I was hoping you'd say that. I'll arrange my schedule immediately. If your Majesty's permit, I'd like to meet with both of you as soon as possible. I'll need to understand your preferences before beginning." The king nodded approvingly. "A true designer. Very well. Our attendants will contact you tomorrow." With that, they offered polite farewells before moving on to greet other guests. I remained frozen. They're gone. Maxwell laughed softly. You can breathe now. I forgot how. I noticed. I finally looked at him. I can't believe that just happened. You earned it. Before I could answer, he reached for my hand beneath the table. Our fingers intertwined so naturally that I barely thought about it anymore. He wore the biggest smile I'd seen from him. I'm proud of you. For simple words. Yet somehow, they meant more than every compliment I'd received that evening. Several days later, I stood inside one of the palace's private drawing rooms, sketchbook in hand. The king and queen sat comfortably across from me while attendants quietly served tea. Business first. Exactly how I preferred it. So, I began. What qualities would you like your outfits to convey during the celebration? The king answered first. Strength. But not intimidation. I wish our people to see a ruler they can trust. I nodded as I wrote. And your majesty? The queen smiled thoughtfully. I'd like elegance. Something memorable. But not so extravagant that it overshadows my husband. I couldn't help smiling. I think I already have a few ideas. Over the next hour, I asked my usual questions. Favorite colors. Preferred fabrics. Embroidery. Jewelry. Comfort. Movement. Everything mattered. Maxwell quietly observed from the corner of the room as always. Occasionally our eyes met. Each time, he'd offer a subtle nod of encouragement. By the time I finished the preliminary sketches, both the king and queen seemed delighted. The queen traced the edge of the paper with careful fingers. I've never seen anything quite like this. The king smiled. I believe we've chosen the right designer. After taking their measurements, I carefully packed away my sketches. I'll begin immediately. We eagerly await your work, the queen replied. Leaving the palace, I felt more inspired than ever. Designing for the royal family. If someone had told Cameron Corbin this would happen, I would have laughed. Life truly had a strange sense of humor. As our carriage turned onto my street, something felt wrong. People were gathered outside. Far too many people. Smoke drifted into the afternoon sky. My heart sank. The carriage hadn't even stopped before I jumped out. I ran. Faster than I ever had. Please, please don't let it be. The words died in my throat. My boutique was burning. Flames roared through the roof while thick black smoke poured into the sky. Neighbors formed desperate lines carrying buckets of water. Guards shouted orders. Wood cracked loudly as part of the upper floor collapsed. No! I rushed toward the entrance. Someone grabbed my arm. Let me go. It's too dangerous. My workshop is in there. My sketches. My fabrics. The heat forced me backward. The roof gave way with a deafening crash. Sparks exploded into the air. Everything I'd worked for, disappeared before my eyes. By the time the fire was finally extinguished, nothing remained. Only blackened beams. Collapsed walls. My knees nearly gave out. Weeks of work. Every pattern. Every design. The sewing machine I'd been so proud to buy. Gone. I lowered my head. For the first time since arriving in this world, I didn't know what to do. Then, strong arms wrapped around me. Maxwell. He pulled me gently against him. Neither of us spoke. He simply held me while I stared at the ruins of what had once been my dream. I'm sorry, he said quietly. So am I. The words came out weaker than I intended. After a long silence, he finally spoke again. Come home with me. I looked up. What? My manor. It's separate from my parents' estate. You'll have privacy. You can stay as long as you need. I couldn't possibly. You can. I don't want to impose. You won't. His voice left no room for argument. Seeing that I still hesitated, he continued. I'll purchase new fabrics. And another sewing machine. I'll also prepare a workspace so you can continue the king's commission. I can't let you do that. You don't have to. I'll repay you. He looked almost offended. I know you will. So stop worrying about your pride. Worry about finishing the royal commission. I opened my mouth to argue again. He gave me one firm look. That's not a request, Clayton. I sighed. Fine. But I'm paying you back. I expected nothing less. His manner was elegant without being overwhelming. Smaller than the Argon estate. Larger than anything I'd ever owned. The servants welcomed me kindly before showing me to a spacious guest room. The room beside it had already been emptied. Within 2 days, new work tables arrived. Shelves, bolts of fabric, boxes of thread, and finally, a beautiful treadle sewing machine, far newer than the one I'd lost. I stood silently in the doorway. You really didn't have to go this far. Maxwell stood beside me. I wanted to. I looked around the room. Everything had been arranged exactly the way I preferred to work. Even the natural light entered from the left side. How? I paid attention. My chest tightened. Somehow, he'd noticed details I hadn't realized he was observing. As I ran my fingers across the polished sewing machine, determination slowly replaced despair. Whoever had burned my boutique had taken my building, my equipment, my savings, but they hadn't taken the one thing that truly mattered, my ability to create. Later that evening, one of Maxwell's guards entered the workshop. My lord, the City Watch has begun investigating the fire. Have they found anything? Not yet. But the guard hesitated. The investigators believe the fire may have been deliberately set. Arson. The word echoed through the room like a distant thunderclap. This had not been an accident. Someone wanted to destroy everything I had built. Chapter 8. Rising from the ashes, the weeks that followed were the busiest of my life. Every morning began before sunrise. Every night ended well past midnight. Designing clothing for the king and queen wasn't simply another commission. It would be seen by the entire kingdom. Every stitch carried the weight of my reputation. Failure wasn't an option. Fortunately, the sewing room Maxwell had prepared for me was everything I needed. The large windows flooded the room with natural light. The new sewing machine worked flawlessly. Shelves filled with fine fabrics lined one wall, while sketches of the royal garments covered another. For hours, I lost myself in the rhythm of creation. Measure, cut, pin, sew, repeat. I barely noticed the passing days. Not that I was ever truly alone. Maxwell had somehow made it his routine to visit the workshop every afternoon. Sometimes he brought tea, sometimes pastries from my favorite bakery. Occasionally, he'd simply sit across from me with a book while I worked. You know, I said one afternoon without looking up from the sleeve I was stitching, you spend an awful lot of time watching someone sew. He turned another page. I've noticed. You could be doing more important things. I am. I paused. What could possibly be more important? He looked at me over the edge of his book. You. My needle stopped moving. I don't know how to respond to that. You don't have to. He smiled before returning to his book as though he'd said something completely ordinary. Meanwhile, my heart refused to behave normally for the rest of the afternoon. Several days later, a palace messenger arrived at the manor. Not with news about the commission, with news about the fire. The investigation had finally concluded. Maxwell and I were summoned to the city guard headquarters. The captain greeted us immediately. My lord, Master Cornell, we've identified those responsible. I instinctively straightened. Who? The captain's expression hardened. 2 fashion designers from the capital. The names meant little to Cameron Corbin, but Clayton's memories recognized them immediately. Veterans of the royal court. For years, they had designed ceremonial clothing for the royal family. They confessed, the captain continued. They admitted they were losing clients. Many nobles canceled future commissions after seeing your work. Their businesses suffered greatly, so they decided to remove the competition. A cold feeling settled in my chest. They burned down my boutique. Because they couldn't compete? The captain nodded. They hired several men to start the fire late at night. Unfortunately for them, those men were quickly identified. They confessed in exchange for lighter sentences. And the designers? They've been arrested. They'll remain imprisoned while awaiting final judgment. I remained silent for several moments. I wanted to feel angry. Instead, I mostly felt tired. All that destruction, all that hatred, simply because people preferred my designs. Maxwell gently rested a hand on my shoulder. It's over. I nodded slowly. Yes, it is. As we left the guard headquarters, Maxwell glanced toward me. What are you thinking? That I wasted too much energy worrying. They destroyed my shop, but they couldn't destroy what mattered. And what's that? I smiled. My imagination. He smiled back. I was hoping you'd say that. The royal garments were finally complete. Standing back to admire them, I felt something I hadn't experienced since arriving in this world. Pride. The king's ceremonial coat was deep navy with subtle silver embroidery inspired by Valedorn's founding crest. The design emphasized authority without unnecessary extravagance. The queen's gown complemented his perfectly. Ivory silk flowed gracefully beneath delicate sapphire embroidery that shimmered only when the light struck it. Separate garments. One vision. Exactly as I'd imagined. Maxwell quietly walked around the mannequins. You've surpassed yourself. You really think so? I know so. The palace fitting took place 2 days later. The king changed first. When he stepped from the dressing room, the attendants fell completely silent. The coat fit perfectly. Every seam rested exactly where it should. The tailored silhouette gave him an unmistakable air of confidence without sacrificing comfort. He rolled one shoulder, raised both arms, even twisted slightly. I've never worn formal clothing this comfortable. I smiled. Good tailoring should move with the wearer. It shouldn't fight against them. Then came the queen. She emerged moments later. A collective gasp filled the room. The gown flowed elegantly behind her with every step, the embroidered details catching the afternoon sunlight filtering through the palace windows. She slowly turned before the mirror. Her eyes widened. I hardly recognized myself. The king looked at her with unmistakable admiration. You look magnificent. So do you. The queen laughed softly before turning toward me. I've worn countless gowns over the years. But this, she gently brushed the embroidered sleeve, is unlike anything I've ever owned. The king approached me carrying a heavy velvet pouch. Our agreed payment. I accepted it with a grateful bow. Then he produced another. And this is because your work exceeded every expectation. I blinked. Your Majesty, this is far too generous. It is exactly what your craftsmanship deserves. The queen nodded in agreement. We reward excellence. I accepted the additional payment with both hands. Thank you. I won't disappoint your majesties again. I don't believe you ever will, the king replied. Leaving the palace, I couldn't stop smiling. Maxwell noticed immediately. You're trying very hard not to grin. I've failed, haven't I? Spectacularly. I can't help it. You shouldn't. That evening I counted my earnings. Between the royal commission and the generous bonus, I finally had enough. Enough to begin again. The following morning, I started searching for a new property. Maxwell naturally had other ideas. Stay. I looked up from the property listings. What? Here. There's no reason to leave. I appreciate everything you've done. I know. But I can't keep imposing forever. You aren't. I still want my own place. He sighed quietly. I expected that answer. You know me too well. I'd like to think so. After several days of searching, I finally found it. A charming brick building just a few streets away from the central market. Larger than my previous boutique. Much larger. The first floor had wide display windows perfect for showcasing finished garments. The second floor contained a modest but comfortable living space. The moment I stepped inside, I knew, this is it. Within the week, the purchase was complete. Boxes filled the new building as workers carried in sewing tables, shelves, bolts of fabric, and the equipment I'd purchased. I spent hours arranging everything exactly the way I wanted. The boutique occupied the entire first floor. Bright, elegant, welcoming. Upstairs became my home. Simple, comfortable, entirely mine. On the evening I finished unpacking, Maxwell stopped by. He slowly looked around the boutique before nodding in approval. It suits you. I smiled. It feels like a fresh start. It is. He walked toward the large front window overlooking the busy street. You know. What? I'll miss having you just across the hallway. I laughed. I'm only a few streets away. I know. But it was nice. I looked around the boutique one more time. Months ago, I had awakened in the body of a struggling tailor whose business was on the verge of collapse. Now, I owned a thriving boutique once again. I had loyal clients, friends I never expected to find, a second chance at the career I loved. And standing beside the window, a man whose presence had quietly become one of the happiest parts of my life. Without realizing it, this new world had slowly begun to feel like home. Chapter 9. The founding anniversary. The day of Valedorn's founding anniversary finally arrived. For the past month, the entire kingdom had been preparing for this celebration. Every street in the royal capital was decorated with banners bearing the royal crest. Flower garlands hung from balconies, musicians performed in every square, and merchants eagerly welcomed visitors who had traveled from distant provinces. The city had never looked more alive. I stood in front of the mirror in my new living quarters, adjusting the cuffs of my own suit. For once, I had actually made something for myself. It was a charcoal three-piece suit with subtle silver embroidery along the cuffs and lapels, elegant enough for a royal celebration without appearing as though I were trying to outshine my clients. A knock sounded on my door. "Come in." Maxwell entered, then promptly stopped walking. He stared at me. "What?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, his eyes slowly traveled from my polished shoes to my neatly styled silver hair. "You clean up rather well." I laughed. "That's your compliment?" "It's the truth." "And you?" I looked him over. He was wearing the ceremonial suit I designed for him months ago, paired with a dark cloak embroidered with House Argon's crest. As always, he looked unfairly handsome. "You've somehow managed to become even more attractive." He smiled. "I learned from the best." I rolled my eyes. "Flattery. It worked, didn't it?" "Maybe." His smile widened. "Shall we?" I offered him my arm dramatically. "My lord." He laughed before taking it. "Lead the way." The royal palace was breathtaking. The palace gardens had been transformed into an enormous celebration venue. Rows of white tents stretched across the grounds while noble families mingled beneath crystal chandeliers suspended from elegant pavilions. Musicians filled the air with lively melodies. Servants moved gracefully among the guests carrying trays of food and wine. My eyes immediately drifted toward the banquet tables. Jared, of course. Even from across the garden, I recognized his work. Fresh artisan breads, roasted meats glazed with fragrant herbs, beautiful pastries, delicate fruit tarts. Everything looked incredible. "I know that look," Maxwell chuckled. "You're thinking about food. I'm thinking about Jared's food. There's a difference." There really isn't. As we entered the main pavilion, nobles politely greeted us. Some bowed. Others thanked me again for their clothing. I still wasn't completely used to people recognizing me. Then, the royal trumpets sounded. Everyone turned toward the palace entrance. The king and queen appeared together. A collective gasp spread throughout the crowd. The ceremonial garments fit perfectly. The king's navy coat reflected authority without overwhelming elegance. Beside him, the queen's ivory gown shimmered beneath the afternoon sunlight, the sapphire embroidery appearing almost like flowing water. The entire courtyard seemed captivated. Whispers spread everywhere. "Who designed those? They're magnificent. I've never seen anything like them. It must be Master Cornell's work." I couldn't stop smiling. The queen caught my eye from across the gathering. She offered the smallest nod. A silent thank you. I bowed in return. The ceremony honoring the kingdom's founding officially began. After speeches from the king and several ministers, another announcement followed. "Our honored guest, the Queen of the Kingdom of Verinder." The crowd parted once more. A magnificent carriage rolled through the palace gates. The neighboring queen stepped out gracefully, accompanied by her royal entourage. Her emerald gown sparkled beneath the sunlight, while an ornate silver crown rested elegantly atop her dark hair. She greeted Valedorn's king warmly. It was clear the neighboring kingdoms enjoyed peaceful relations. Trade, diplomacy, friendship. Watching rulers greet one another with genuine respect felt strangely refreshing. "I wonder if she'll commission you next," Maxwell whispered. I quietly elbowed him. "Don't jinx me. I'm serious. I've done enough royal commissions to last me a lifetime. So far." I laughed. So far. Before long, familiar faces began gathering around us. "Clayton," I turned. Jared hurried over, looking every bit as cheerful as ever. He wrapped me in a quick hug before stepping back. "You made it. I wouldn't miss this." He adjusted the sleeve of his ivory formal coat. "I've already eaten." "Of course you have. You cooked everything. Quality control." I laughed. "That's what we're calling it now? It sounds more professional." A moment later, Duke Carmichael joined us. He greeted Maxwell with a firm handshake before nodding toward me. "My compliments. The royal attire exceeded every expectation." "Thank you." The king looked exceptionally dignified. "The queen hasn't stopped talking about her gown," Jared added proudly. "I overheard her recommending you to 3 different noble ladies." I blinked. "She did." Repeatedly. Maxwell folded his arms with obvious satisfaction. "I told you. You really have become the kingdom's favorite designer." "I still think that's surreal." Jared grinned. "Get used to it." As music filled the courtyard once more, servants began serving dinner. Naturally, everyone gravitated toward Jared's creations. I picked up a slice of herb bread before taking a bite. Still perfect. Still the best bread in the kingdom. Jared watched me expectantly. "Well," I chewed thoughtfully, "I've decided." "Oh, I still hate you." He burst into laughter. "Because the food's too good?" "Exactly. I'll never be satisfied with ordinary bread again." "I'll accept that complaint." The evening passed with laughter, conversation, and celebration. As fireworks illuminated the night sky above the palace, I found myself standing slightly apart from the crowd beside Maxwell. The colorful lights reflected across the gardens. "They're beautiful," I murmured. "They are." After a brief silence, Maxwell looked toward me instead of the fireworks. "You've accomplished a great deal in a very short time." I smiled softly. "I couldn't have done it alone." "No, you couldn't." I turned toward him. "I had someone who kept believing in me." His expression softened. "And I'd do it again." The final fireworks exploded across the night sky, bathing the palace in brilliant shades of gold, blue, and crimson. As I watched the celebration unfold before me, I realized something that would have been impossible only months ago. When I first opened my eyes in Clayton Cornell's body, this kingdom had felt like a prison built by fate. Now, standing beside Maxwell, surrounded by friends, watching a kingdom celebrate its history, it finally felt like a place where I truly belonged. Chapter 10. A Future We Chose. A few days after the founding anniversary, life finally settled into something resembling normal. My commissions remained steady. The boutique continued attracting nobles from every corner of the kingdom. And Maxwell, well, he still found an excuse to visit almost every day. "I happened to be nearby. I was checking on your progress. I thought you might have skipped lunch." The excuses changed. The result never did. He always stayed for hours. Not that I minded. In fact, I had quietly begun looking forward to the sound of the bell above my boutique door. One evening, after closing the shop, Maxwell suggested we take a walk. The streets were calm, illuminated by rows of lanterns that cast warm golden light across the cobblestones. Neither of us spoke much. The silence between us had long since become comfortable. Eventually, we found ourselves overlooking a small lake inside one of the city's public gardens. The water reflected the moonlight like polished silver. "It's peaceful here," I said. "It is." Maxwell leaned against the stone railing. I used to come here whenever I needed to think. And today, he looked at me. I came because I have something to say. His tone immediately caught my attention. I turned to face him completely. He took a slow breath. I've rehearsed this conversation countless times. That made me smile. I find that hard to believe. It's true. For someone who rarely struggles to find the right words, I suddenly couldn't. For the first time since I'd met him, Lord Maxwell Argon looked nervous. His hands rested quietly on the railing before he finally met my eyes. Clayton, I love you. I don't know exactly when it happened. Perhaps it was the first time I saw you lose yourself while sketching. Perhaps it was watching you rebuild after losing everything. Or perhaps, he smiled softly. It happened little by little until one day I realized I couldn't imagine my life without you. He stepped closer. I don't expect an answer simply because I've confessed. I only wanted you to know. My heart pounded so loudly I was certain he could hear it. I laughed quietly, not because it was funny, because I couldn't believe this was actually happening. I've been trying very hard not to fall in love with you. He blinked. I failed. A hopeful smile slowly appeared on his face. I love you too. I think. No. I shook my head. I know. I've loved you for quite some time now. Before either of us realized it, we were both laughing. The tension disappeared instantly. So, Maxwell said, is this the part where I kiss you? It would be rather disappointing if you didn't. He smiled, then gently cupped my face. The kiss was soft, unhurried, warm. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't need to be. Simply felt right. When we finally pulled apart, I rested my forehead against his. There is something I need to tell you. His expression grew serious. Anything. I took a deep breath. The Clayton Cornell you met isn't really Clayton. He frowned slightly but remained silent. I died. In another world. My real name was Cameron Corbin. I woke up in Clayton's body after my plane crashed. I kept his memories. But everything else, I brought with me. For several moments, Maxwell simply stared at me. I braced myself. Confusion, disbelief, questions. Instead, he let out a quiet sigh. That explains everything. I blinked. That's your response? He nodded. It explains your strange expressions, the odd comparisons, the unusual knowledge, the way you occasionally spoke about things no one else understood. I always felt there was something different. He smiled gently. I simply never imagined it was another world. So, he reached for my hand. Whether you're Cameron or Clayton, you're still the man I love. Emotion tightened my throat. You really don't make this difficult, do you? I try not to. I laughed through suspiciously watery eyes. That night, as we walked home hand in hand beneath the stars, I realized something. I had been successful in my previous life. Famous, respected, admired. But I had never been this happy. Not once. Neither as Cameron, nor as Clayton. A few weeks later, another idea began occupying my thoughts. One afternoon, I spread several sketches across my work table. Maxwell wandered into the workshop carrying tea. He looked over the drawings. These aren't noble garments. They're not. I tapped one of the sketches. I've been thinking. Dangerous. I laughed. I've spent months designing for nobles. They deserve beautiful clothing. But so do ordinary people. He studied the drawings more carefully. Simple coats, comfortable trousers, practical dresses, durable work clothes that still looked stylish. You want to design for everyone. I do. Beautiful clothing shouldn't belong only to people with titles. It should belong to anyone who wants to feel confident. Maxwell smiled. I like that dream. I was hoping you would. Of course, one designer couldn't possibly manage that alone. I began searching throughout the capital for promising young talent. Not famous designers. Not established tailors. People with potential. By the end of the month, I'd hired 4 apprentices. Elena had an incredible eye for color. Thomas understood practical construction better than anyone I'd met. Mira excelled at embroidery without making it overwhelming. Lucas possessed remarkable creativity despite having almost no formal training. Together, we worked every day. I taught them everything I knew about balance, silhouettes, fabric selection, comfort. Most importantly, I taught them that clothing should serve the person wearing it, not the other way around. Slowly, our first collection came together. Affordable, comfortable, stylish, designed for farmers, teachers, shopkeepers, craftsmen, mothers, students, ordinary people living ordinary lives. With Maxwell's encouragement, I rented another building near the marketplace. Unlike my boutique for noble clients, this shop felt bright and welcoming. No intimidating displays, no extravagant decorations, just beautifully made clothing that anyone could afford. Opening day arrived. I wasn't sure what to expect. The answer came almost immediately. Customers poured through the doors. Young couples, families, laborers, merchants. Within hours, many shelves were nearly empty. One elderly woman held a neatly tailored coat against herself before looking at me with tears in her eyes. I've never owned something this beautiful, and I can actually afford it. Those words stayed with me for the rest of the day. A week later, something unexpected happened. Several noble ladies entered the shop. One of them picked up a simple linen dress. It's comfortable. Another tried on one of our everyday coats. I could wear this while traveling. Soon, even nobles began buying from the common clothing store. Not because it was luxurious, because it was practical, comfortable, elegant in its simplicity. Watching farmers and aristocrats purchase clothing from the same shop, I couldn't help smiling. Fashion had always been about more than wealth. It was about expressing yourself, about dignity, about confidence. Standing beside me as customers filled the store, Maxwell quietly slipped his hand into mine. You've done it again. I looked around at the laughter, the excitement, and the pride on my team's faces. No, I smiled. We've done it. And somehow, that sounded even better. The end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel for more exciting chapters every week. Thank you for your support, and I'll see you in the next video.